Hi, everybody. My name's Lynn Sheridan, and I've got two jobs tonight. One is to welcome you, and the other is to introduce our speakers. So welcome. We're glad to see that so many people have come out for tonight's TUC Talk, our third in our series for the season. Transformative Upbeat Conversations, TUC Talks. Our speakers tonight are well known in our community. They are both community leaders who are transformative, upbeat, and inspirational. Nicole LeBlanc has held several leadership roles in our community: fundraising, communications, municipal and federal politics, embracing each new project with energy and enthusiasm and professionalism. Her volunteer commitment to Pictou County is equally impressive. Nicole is the project navigator for Healthy Pictou County, a physician-led community effort to attract and retain healthcare providers and students in our region. Aaron Smith has demonstrated his commitment to our community in many ways. As a family physician at the Westville Medical Clinic, Aaron had one of the largest family practices in northern Nova Scotia. He brought empathy, professionalism, and innovation to his practice. And the innovation did not go unnoticed. In January, he took on the role as Executive Director of Medicine for the northern region of our province. His experience and training in family medicine, epidemiology, community health makes him an ideal candidate for this new and vital role in our community. Welcome to Nicole and Aaron.
Are we good? Good? Thumbs up. Good. So thank you for having us here tonight. Excited to be here with Dr. Smith. Before we kick things off, one thing we want to address and kind of set the context for the evening. What we're talking about of a physician shortage and not having a doctor isn't an easy topic for everyone to sit and listen to or even experience in their day-to-day. So tonight, we hope to shed some light on the current situation, give some context to how this community stepped up, doing something about it. And it's not intended to gloss over the current situation or sort of put a positive spin on everything, but really provide some insight into the good work that's being done that a lot of people don't know about.
Thanks, Cole. I'd similarly like to acknowledge that the subject of doctor recruitment and availability is a very difficult one for many people. And I know, giving this talk, that many people in the community, many of my friends, many of my neighbors, have been affected by this. Further, I know that there are many, and probably some in this audience, who were affected by my own practice closure in January, I guess the end of December of this year. However, this is a very important subject, and it's one that both Nicole and I are extremely passionate about. And we're so happy to be here with you tonight, talking about the work we're trying to do.
The next slide. It's good? Oh, okay, sorry. So what we're going to talk about tonight first is some myths. So a lot of them you've probably either heard or I can't seem to stay away from the comments on social media or news websites. But one of the first ones that I see a lot, usually not by physicians, is Nova Scotia doctors are the lowest paid doctors.
This is a very pervasive myth, especially on social media and in common circles. And in fact, not too many years ago, this probably had some validity. It was probably true that we're not paid at the same rate as other physicians across the country, especially out west and central Canada. However, recently, with updates to our master agreement, so that's the agreement that we have with the Department of Health and Wellness, that we're actually doing really well. We have increases in our pay that have at least brought us on par with most parts of Canada and have put us in the forefront in Atlantic Canada. And we have a lot of innovative incentive programs to encourage people to practice here and to practice rurally to fill some of our gaps.
You're
oh, yeah, it's me, yeah.
Myth. Yep.
So the next myth is that doctors only care about money.
Does it matter? Absolutely. It matters for a lot of people, but it's not the only consideration, and that's something we're going to talk about a little bit later in the presentation. The next myth we hear a lot is doctors need a replacement before they retire.
And the answer to that is complicated. Some doctors are very lucky enough to find somebody to take over the practice when they leave. The difficulty is that there often aren't nearly enough doctors around to take up the slack when someone wants to leave their practice. Well, most doctors try to have some kind of avenue for patient care for their high needs patients when they leave. It's not always possible. There are some stipulations around practice notification for patients, but it's not an absolute requirement to have a person come in when the doctor retires. Next myth. Doctors aren't choosing rural Nova Scotia to practice.
People do love the city, which is great, but they are choosing rural Nova Scotia to practice. So that's something we'll talk a little bit about later, about what they're looking for. Things that we often take for granted, like safe communities, short commute times, balance, are all really big selling points for a rural lifestyle, especially being so close to the ocean is a huge, huge selling point as well. And another positive too, if we can take a positive out of COVID with respect, that the world's eyes are on Nova Scotia as one of the safest places to live. So that's actually spawned some interest in our province as well, and rural Nova Scotia. And so last, one of the myths is the doctor shortage is a Pictou County problem, and the doctor shortage is a Nova Scotia problem.
So to answer that, let's have a closer look at what the statistics actually show. Go to the next slide, please. Oh, still waiting.
He's walking quickly.
He's walking. Yeah.
He's running. Now
he's running.
Yeah.
There we are.
There.
So physician shortage is not a uniquely Pictou County, nor is it a uniquely Nova Scotia problem. There's actually a Canada-wide shortage in physicians, and specifically in primary care physicians. Some places are better, some places are worse across the country. Similarly, some places are better or worse within the province. The number varies almost day to day, but we know that about 5,000 people are actively looking for a primary care provider or have added their name to the 811 list locally. It's a similar picture across Nova Scotia, anywhere outside of HRM. So anywhere out of our urban center, this is a huge problem.
And so the numbers that you're seeing on the screen is actually part of a report that's publicly available through the Nova Scotia Health. If you just Google NSH Native Family Practice Waitlist, they actually have all of the reports there as well. So they're publicly available for you to be able to look at. They're not hiding that information. It is there for you to see. If we can go to the next slide there.
Actually, just before you do,
okay.
I just want to talk one more thing about that. Is that it's what's interesting about our physician numbers in this province, and this is going to be something that probably gets me in trouble, but hear me out. By the books, we actually close to have enough doctors. If we look at doctors per Nova Scotia resident, our per capita rate is actually not that bad. And in fact, it's probably one of the better ones across the country. The issue is that we have not enough doctors choosing to practice in primary care, and we have not enough doctors choosing to practice outside of Halifax.
We'll head to the next slide there. So it is a little bit doom and gloom, but we again want to kind of set the context of where this problem was coming from, and you're probably wondering, how did we get here?
So really our current situation is a collision of two separate processes. The first is that in general, our population in Nova Scotia is older and more burdened by chronic disease than ever before, as our birth rates have stayed low and our baby boomers are reaching ages where their health needs become more and more important. Also, a system-wide loss of focus on preventative health has led to high rates of chronic disease such as osteoarthritis, heart disease, and diabetes. Our province is particularly affected by this, especially in our non-urban areas. The second part of this collision course is changing practice patterns of our physicians. The days of a doctor graduating from medical school, moving to a particular area, and maintaining a single large practice for the duration of their professional lives has come and it's gone. Most new graduates are starting their careers in medicine in the context of their families and with working spouses and a focus on quality of life and of balance. New physicians will typically start their careers with job exploration, choosing temporary, or as we call them, locum positions. And oftentimes, new family physicians, for example, will go through 2, 3, 4 of these locum positions before they settle on a place for a long period of time. We also know that most physicians will shift their career focus or location at least 2 to 3 times more in the span of their career. Because a career in medicine, especially primary care, is so incredibly portable, most physicians and their families place a higher priority on the right fit in their community. Thinking about professional opportunities, of course, but also thinking about safety, culture, competency, education, and access to recreational opportunities.
So next slide. You're probably wondering who's involved. So I know when I first got started, and this probably isn't actually even a full list of who all the stakeholders are, but I think it's helpful to understand kind of even generally who does what. Myself, I'm still learning all the time. There's a lot of acronyms when it comes to medicine, and they just love them. So it's nice to be able to explore that. So we're just going to talk about who some of the key players are and the stakeholders are in these efforts.
Yeah, I would agree. There's a lot of players in the health game in Nova Scotia, and in fact, I've been in clinical practice for 12 years and in this new administrative practice for just under the last year, and I'm still sorting some of this stuff out. So it's a complicated picture. So if we start at the very top, which is Nova Scotia Health. So Nova Scotia Health is the body that administers healthcare within the province, including acute hospital-based care and community-based and preventative care. It's funded by the Department of Health and Wellness and operates under the direction of a voluntary board of directors. Physicians are not employees of Nova Scotia Health, and that's something that's often very confusing for people. They provide contracted services within the system. Physician services and integration into the health system are overseen by the Department of Medical Affairs within NSH, or Nova Scotia Health, which is comprised of a physician and non-physician leadership structure across the province. Physicians must be granted privileges by Medical Affairs and Nova Scotia Health to work within the Nova Scotia Health system. If we go now kind of down to the bottom, I guess right, or left on my screen, sorry, I'm messing that up. So we get to Department of Health, or Department of Health and Wellness. So Department of Health and Wellness is the governmental organization that's a funder for Nova Scotia Health, but also the holder of contracts for physician services within the province. In other words, although physicians work within NSH, they're paid by Department of Health. Fee-for-service physicians provide services and bill the Department of Health through MSI for services rendered. Salaried physicians provide services within a contract that outlines deliverables expected. The Department of Health also sets high-level priorities for health maintenance and delivery across the province. If we go back up diagonally to the College of Physicians, the College of Physicians is the regulatory body for Nova Scotia physicians. Their role is to ensure that the services provided by physicians within the province are safe and confidently delivered through a licensing process. Every physician who practices in the province must hold a Nova Scotia medical license through the College of Physicians and Surgeons. Dalhousie University is the only medical school in the Maritime provinces. Dalhousie is responsible for delivering medical education to undergraduate medical students and postgrad residents in a distributed manner across the Maritimes. And just take a minute on that too, because there's some terminology in there that's very important. So undergraduate medical students are folks that have been admitted to medical school but have not yet graduated. Residents, medical residents, have graduated from medical school. They have an educational medical license and can practice within our hospitals and within our communities. The best way to think of residents are almost like apprentices, is that they finish their schooling, quote unquote, but they still need some mentoring and support as they transition into independent practice. And finally, Doctors Nova Scotia at the very bottom. So even though Nova Scotia doctors don't have a union, Doctors Nova Scotia is their union equivalent for advocacy for physicians and physician issues in the province, including the master agreement or payment model. And then finally, we have you, and I'm going to kick it over to Nicole for the you part.
Sure. So we can head to the next slide there. So as Lynn shared, I work for Healthy Pictou County. So it's a physician-led community effort supporting the attraction and retention of medical staff and students in Pictou County. It's part of a 5-year commitment, so we're about 2 years into the commitment now. There's one staff person, which is myself, as the project navigator, and I report to the Citizens for a Healthy Pictou County, which is the group that led the efforts to bring the Wellness Center to fruition. Are the other players in that as well is our recruitment and retention committee. So I report to the citizens group, and our recruitment and retention committee is sort of where our governance comes from. These efforts started in the spring of 2018, so prior to me coming on board, by a group of doctors in the hospital who said we can either sit back and watch this happen, or we can jump in and try to help. So that's what's kind of unique about what Healthy Pictou County is. My role has 3 areas of focus, and the first one is attraction. And the reason I say attraction and not recruitment is that we actually have recruiters through Nova Scotia Health. Our efforts are very much complementary efforts to the Health Authority and a lot of our other stakeholders. It helps with avoiding duplication, and it's really our role to be here to provide that community on-the-ground support. The second piece is retention. Sometimes I say that's probably even more important than recruitment. It's a really helpful piece. It's just not as easy to quantify. So sometimes you see the numbers about how many are coming and going, but it's hard to sometimes quantify what that value is for retention. And then the third piece is supporting students or residents, as Aaron outlined. So if someone's coming here for a placement, or someone's considering going into medicine, or any of our family medicine residents, that's a big area of my role too. Our efforts have been seen as a model across the province. So you're seeing navigators pop up in other communities. We have a whole network of other people in similar roles that may look a little bit different, because what works here doesn't work in Yarmouth or Lunenburg or other places. And we've got a really big network that works complementary to NSH, which is part of Aaron's role.
And I'd like to highlight how innovative that process and Nicole's work has been. Community taking ownership of stabilization of physician services and recruitment and retentions of physicians. Really, this is the first time in the province, and I think probably nationally, that this has been done. It's been done as a grassroots organization, funded by community, funded by business, and funded by physicians. And it dovetails with what Nova Scotia Health does on the recruitment and retention end very well. So Nova Scotia Health has dedicated recruiters for Northern Zone, including the Pictou County area. Also has a dedicated recruiter for medical residents. And we identify gaps in service and be strategic about who we recruit and when and why. But groups such as Healthy Pictou County really fill in the gaps in terms of that community connection and that personal touch. So it's a really innovative approach to physician recruitment.
So we'll head to the next slide. A favorite question is, why can't we just make more doctors?
And look, our picture there is our beautiful palliative care unit at the Aberdeen with Drs. Olsen and Lum, 2 of our physicians who are practicing in Pictou. So that's a question we get all the time, and that's a question that comes up in papers and editorials and social media comments. We just need to make more doctors. We should just train more, and then we could get ourselves out of this problem very quickly. And unfortunately, that's a very simple answer to what's a very complex problem. Making doctors is a long and very expensive process for both public spending and individual expense. It's generally accepted that each Nova Scotia doctor trained will use approximately $2 million of public funds to supplement their education before they graduate. We have to, because of that high investment in time, which, and we'll go into the time course a little bit in the next slide, I think, because of that high investment in time and high investment in public funds, we have to be very rigorous to make sure that every physician who starts the educational process will finish and be able to come out and see patients and interact with the health system. We also have to make sure that Nova Scotia trained physicians are of extremely high quality. Again, meaning that the selection process has to be very rigorous. Having said that, there have been consistent expansions in primary care medical residency training program over the past years, meaning that we are educating an increasing number of family doctors all over the Maritime provinces. This number increases year by year. I mentioned before Dalhousie University. Dalhousie and how they train physicians, both medical students and residents, is a very distributed program. It's not just happening at Halifax within the university or the teaching hospital. In fact, Dalhousie University Medical School is located in more than 100 teaching sites across the Maritimes, involving 1,768 clinical faculty members, both in the city and across in more rural community areas. And also, at any given time, we have just shy of 500 residents, or medical residents, within our healthcare community. That's across specialties. We also know that Dalhousie medical residents in whole, we have about 150 graduate every year into full practice. Similarly, Dalhousie University provides ongoing medical education for our physicians in practice, with over 900 family physicians and 550 specialists, keeping the professional knowledge current through Dalhousie continuing medical education. Going back a bit, we mentioned family medicine training. And right now, our family medicine training through Dalhousie University through residencies is again distributed. There is a large family medicine residency program in Halifax, in the city, but we also have satellite sites all across the Maritimes. And our current sites are the Annapolis Valley, Cape Breton, Fredericton, Moncton, St. John, Halifax, PEI, Southwest Nova Scotia, and more recently here at the North Nova training program. All told, those sites are graduating about 80, sorry, not graduating, at any given time there's 80 family medicine residents across the sites across Atlantic Canada. The North Nova site is the newest addition and one that I'm particularly proud of, I should say. It's a cooperative effort between Cumberland, Colchester, Pictou County, and more recently Antigonish. We started about a year and a half ago with our first cohort of 5 residents, spread again across Cumberland, Colchester, and Pictou County. And our first cohort will be graduating from the residency program this coming summer. After the first year, the second year in, we expanded to include Antigonish, and we now have 7 residents every year that are being trained locally for careers in family medicine. One thing that I'm particularly proud of is that it's not just in our more or our less rural centers that we're training residents, and in fact, in our second cohort of residents, we have somebody that's based entirely in Tatamagouche for the entirety of their family medicine training. Go to the next slide. So let's take a quick look at how not quick it is to become a doctor in Canada. So if you look here, most people before medical school you have to do some type of degree. You have to have a degree to get in. Most times it's not one. Most times it's an undergraduate degree and then some kind of graduate level training. Myself, I did an undergraduate degree in biology and a 2-year degree in epidemiology and community health. At that point, if you are accepted to medical school, at Dalhousie University, you enter into 4 years of undergraduate training to get your medical degree. Some schools across Canada are 3-year programs, but Dalhousie is 4. You finish medical school and you decide what kind of doctor you'd like to be. You have to apply to different residency training programs across Canada or across the world even, and hopefully get accepted to where you want to go. The length of the residency program varies by specialty. For family medicine, in most cases, it's 2 years. In some cases, it's very much longer than that. I have a good friend and a colleague who trained as a cardiac surgeon and after medical school entered into a 7-year residency program. Oftentimes, the residency program is not the end of your training either. A lot of specialty physicians will go on after and do additional training as what are called fellows, and that can be 1 or 2 years. So as you see here, even the shortest path to becoming a practicing physician typically is at least a 10-year process, if not longer.
Next slide. So you're probably wondering what we're doing about it. So that was quite a bit of context, which, that was about a minute of describing how long it takes to become a doctor in Canada. So we have a lot going on, and I put a few examples up here on the slide. Some of them you may have seen, some of them you haven't. If you knew about every single thing I was doing, it would mean I'm not doing my job right, because my job is to support recruitment efforts, prospective physicians, medical students, and learners. So if you saw everything that was on here, I probably wouldn't be doing too good of a job. So you may have seen some things. One of them I'm not going to try to guess left or right or where it is here, but above my logo there, we did a fully developed and branded website. So when I first started, we were called the Pictou County Healthcare Professional Initiative. Having a communications background and some marketing experience, I was like, that's gotta go, that's too wordy, too much going on. So we actually have a full brand, so you can check out our website at healthypictoucounty.ca. A lot of our materials, you'll notice, aren't just geared towards physician. That is the that is the primary focus, but it's also geared towards their families, their spouses, their children, and also other healthcare providers as well. We've attended over the summer we created some retention events, so it was obviously challenging for everyone, but especially on our frontline workers. So we did some cycling events, so you'll see a group of doctors there that went cycling. We did some kayaking and some other arts events too. We developed recruitment tools as well. So what you'll see up there in the bottom corner is a one-pager on the West Side Health Center. You may have seen some of our videos going around Facebook. Those are intended for people to share. If you feel like you want to share it, you can. Word of mouth is a wonderful way for people to hear about what we're doing in Pictou County. And as I mentioned earlier, with our strong response to COVID, a lot of eyes are on Nova Scotia, so it's nice for us to have these resources available to us. Not only that, they're especially helpful during COVID when things are virtual. So I'll speak later about how site visits are a really big part of how we recruit. Just on Tuesday, we actually did a virtual site visit. So it was nice to have our hands on clinic tours, some of the community pieces, and the one-pagers. So, and those things don't happen overnight. So it was nice for us to build up our toolkit. I mentioned how we support students and residents. So on the bottom there, that screenshot of the Zoom there, you may have seen it. It actually got some attention by CBC, which was really cool. We wanted to do something special for the residents as we went into the holidays. Many of them weren't able to travel home. This is sort of their home where they're away from a lot of their family members. So we did an online cooking class with chefs from away here in New Glasgow. So prepared meal kits, distribute them all the way from here to Amherst, because that's where the site is. Did an online cooking class, and it was a really fun event. The signs you see here, the thank you to all our essential service workers. I know I fished some out of a couple ditches because some withstood the wind, some didn't. Some are still around town, but that was a partnership we did during COVID just to really show the community that we were thankful for them, especially during the shutdowns. And then along the top there, there's a picture of myself and Dr. Brad McDougall from Westville at a recruitment event. I have to say, a lobster shirt gets really good attention. It's a conversation starter when you're at these types of events. It was nice for us. Prior to me, we weren't really, me being in this role, we weren't really at those events. We weren't really present. So it was nice for us to have our own materials and us to have a presence and be one of those players as well. And then up in the top right corner is probably one of my favorite annual events. Great boat name too. So a shout out to Tyler for that. What we've done the last 2 years, as Aaron mentioned, the residency program is new. So when we have a new cohort of residents come in, we like to introduce them to the community. And we can't think of a better way to do that than a boat ride on the Northumberland Strait, head for a swim, and enjoy some garlic fingers and pizza. So I'm going to speak later a little bit about what the community is already doing, but that's one of the biggest pieces, and it's usually my favorite picture every year. We've had really good weather the last 2 years, and I don't talk about it because I don't want to jinx it. So on to the next slide, you're going to see that picture again because it's one of my favorites, and Aaron's going to talk a little about how we recruit.
So, understatement of the presentation, health is important, and people's health is important. And you may be wondering if, given our situation here with physician shortages that seem to be getting worse and worse, if we take anyone. And I hope you're all relieved to hear that we don't. We don't want placeholders. We don't want people that aren't delivering the most high-quality health care we can. Keep in mind that the right fit is extremely important. Typically with healthcare delivery now, we're not talking about recruiting solo practitioners that come to an office and set up and practice on their own. We're talking about physicians that need to be integrated into a highly functioning team that works together extremely well to deliver quality health care. The cost of not getting that right is too high. To make sure that teams function well, it's important that the right fit of personal and professional attributes are considered carefully as we recruit. If we aren't thoughtful about this, the quality of care delivered by the team may be compromised and destabilized.
So I had mentioned earlier too that site visits are a really big part of how we recruit. So that's actually a program that's through Nova Scotia Health. That's where you would have a physician and their spouse or their family come and actually explore Pictou County. So obviously some challenges with that. We have been doing virtual site visits, which are it's a little bit different, but it's also nice when it's freezing out like this to be able to show beautiful pictures and videos of Melmurby Beach. So those are a big area where we have that chance, and as Aaron mentioned, to really talk about that fit. So when we have people coming and their families, we totally tailor a site visit to fit them for looking at what type of practice they'd like to do, actually meeting people that they might be working with, exploring things for their families. We've visited Miss Carla's dance studio before. We had a family who was here for a site visit who spoke Arabic. We went to Maple Cedar for lunch, and Rania and them actually had a really beautiful conversation in Arabic, and it was something that was very special. That wasn't planned, and it was really neat. Site visits can happen, and you may not hear from people for a while, or they might follow up with you. We always try to keep the door open when we do that. One of the recruitment events that we attended almost 2 years ago, we actually had a chance to speak with a resident at the time who was asking us where the New Brunswick Health booth was, and we jokingly said, "You don't want to talk to them, you want to talk to us." So we did show her where the booth was, but had a great conversation with her. And I actually, she came for a site visit last October, had a great time, but had been looking at some further training. Reached out 2 weeks ago and said she was considering Nova Scotia, saw Pictou County was on the list, and wanted to reach back out again. So some of these things can take up to a year or 2 years. So it's a really big investment of time and money. And if we were doing something overnight, we would be doing that kind of stuff. So, and we'll get to that a little bit later. So we'll go to the next slide.
Perfect. So oftentimes the dominant narrative we hear, for understandable reasons, is a negative one. Why are physicians leaving and why can't we recruit? Why aren't we having any success? Why are they all leaving town? When was the last time that any of us had a conversation on social media or in Tim Hortons or over a card table that talked about the success we've had in doctor recruitment locally? And I think that's a shame, because I think we're doing some amazing work. Not to say that there's not work to be done and there's not important work to be done, but you'd be pleased to hear that we actually have been quite successful lately, even through the challenges that COVID has presented. For example, in the past 6 months at the Aberdeen Hospital, we have added on 6 new physician hires, 1 per month, every month. And we have 3 more pending hires that are coming very soon. So that's 9 additions to our small physician community in the past 6 months. Oftentimes that's not talked about. We don't release that publicly. We hear informally about this news, but for privacy reasons, we don't often release that publicly. But it's a narrative that's absent in our community. So I just wanted to share that we are having some success. We have ongoing challenges. We have huge challenges in primary care, but we are having great success in adding to our physician community locally.
Just to give you a few examples of that, and again, just being mindful of people's privacy. We're talking with human beings. We're talking about their families. They do deserve some privacy, but there is some good news, as Aaron mentioned, on the specialist side and at the Aberdeen and within our physician family here in Pictou County. We recently welcomed a husband and wife duo, bringing our OBGYN complement up to 3, and our anesthesiology department up to 5 as well. And even though it was during COVID, it was obviously challenging. The family had to come here and quarantine, but I'll get to it a little bit later about what the community's doing. But we had people making chowder, dropping off biscuits, wondering what the teenagers who were here, cooped up with their parents for 2 weeks, what they were going to do. So actually helped us do a quarantine countdown package. So the community was really a big part of that. We had 2 new internists, one returned back home to Pictou County, which is so wonderful, and another one on the way, which brings that up to a full complement as well. And the husband of a local doctor started back in December, our general surgery. So those stories are there, and again, it's just you don't hear about them for people's privacy reasons, or we don't make big announcements and things like that, but there are really good things happening, and some of them just take time to get started and even come up to completion. So next slide.
So In terms of what physicians and their families are looking for, from a professional standpoint, physicians are incredibly privileged. Most, with a few exceptions, physicians can hang their shingle anywhere across the country, and actually Canadian-trained physicians can hang their shingle anywhere across the world and have a stable, good income. From a practice perspective, there are some things that are important to physicians that come, of course. How they work every day, what their team looks like, what their work-life balance will be. But most times, what's much more important is looking at what the community has to offer them or their family. So it's the community considerations that oftentimes have more effect on physicians coming and staying than it is the professional aspects. Nicole will highlight some of this.
Yeah, so I had mentioned earlier that something I think sometimes we might take for granted is safe communities. I've had physicians come to the area asking where our gated communities are, and I have to tell them, probably much to the dismay of most local police enforcement, that a lot of people don't lock their doors. So people are often surprised to find that out. Schooling opportunities, sports, arts, after-school care, all those things, when you're considering, if you can picture what it's like to move your entire family somewhere else, are big considerations. Affordable homes are huge. One of my favorite things was when we were welcoming physicians from the UK was when we had the sell sheets to actually convert it to their currency. And I've had physicians in the nicest way possible laugh at our home prices, and I laugh with them, and then I'm like, you can buy 2 homes if you want. So it's kind of a back and forth, and it's pretty funny. They're also amazed with what you can have near the water and down by the beach, or the amount of land that you can get when they're comparable to small townhouses. So that's a big thing. Recreation and outdoor spaces is a big one. Trenton Park is usually a stop on our efforts. I had someone ask me one time how much it costs to use the park. So I, being from Trenton, I had to be like, you can make a donation if you'd like, but it's actually free for you to use, which is kind of surprising for some people. I accidentally skipped over an important one, opportunities for spouses and children. So quite often when there are site visits, a lot of time physicians are looking at the clinics and what their practice is going to look like, but for some, a practice is a practice is a practice, and there are some important details they have to figure out, but they want to know what their spouse is going to do for employment or outside of work, or what their children are going to do. We had talked earlier about physicians looking for balance, so I think us taking commute times is something that we take for granted a little bit. There's one physician who shared that he used to travel up to 3 hours, which is almost unfathomable, I think, for anyone around here. If you get all red lights, I think people here get cranky, and it's a 10-minute drive. His commute to work now is 3 minutes. It's not even comparable. And I have yet to have someone tell me, I didn't pick Pictou County because you didn't have X, Y, Z. So it's a bit of a comfort that we have what people need here. It's usually just because, as Aaron mentioned, it's about fit. They make a connection with a person or with a team. So on the next slide, you're probably wondering what people find when they come to Pictou County, and your eyes aren't playing tricks. They find everything that I just outlined. So it's what's been neat in this role for me, having grown up here, moved away a little bit and come back, it was really a chance to stop, look at what we have, and really sell this community. So it's a pretty cool job and a fortunate spot to be in. So on the next slide, you're probably like, that sounds great. So what are we doing wrong?
So we left this blank on purpose because I think we need to rethink what we're doing wrong and what we're doing right, and we need to rethink our outcomes. Physicians as professionals will come and will go, as I outlined earlier. The days of a physician setting up a practice and staying, especially in a rural town, for the duration of their career are gone. So we have to expect that we have flow into our community and flow out of our community. What we need to focus on really is ensuring that the flow into our community is greater than the flow out, and that people come and connect and want to stay. Our efforts are investments in processes and decisions that are long-term. Things like supporting students and residents, or building our toolkit to sell this community and support the gaps that we identify in physician services and community. So it's part of a process, and we have to look at it as part of a process. We have to move beyond a physician leaving as a failure, but as part of a process and part of a flow that we expect. Having said that, if we go to the next slide, we do try to get information about why people leave. And they all say because it's freezing. Actually, that's not true. The reasons vary, but shouldn't be surprising. You know, physicians are people who live with families and make decisions in the context of their families and their jobs and their extended families and community. And they leave communities for the same reasons that everybody else leaves communities or jobs. Families or personal reasons, being closer to kids, being closer to families, even religious affiliations or communities. Physicians retire, and they deserve to without guilt. We're in a time now where many of our local physicians have had multi-decade-long careers, and it's simply time for them to enjoy what they work so hard to do. And again, it's important to know that moving doesn't necessarily equal failure, or closing a practice doesn't necessarily equal failure of our process. You know, we expect that. It's going to happen. It's a natural progression, as is with any profession. I can share a little bit from my own personal story. I was 12 years in clinical practice at the Westville Clinic, and you know, enjoyed it and did very hard work and very demanding work as part of a very high functional team. I was offered a chance to move into administration with the health authority, where I wouldn't just be having touch points on the people's lives within my practice, but have the opportunity to have touch points across the region, in fact, across the province, in terms of impact and influence on policy and healthcare delivery and these big questions. It was a very hard decision to leave. I left knowing that I was going to have very real and tangible impacts on people's lives. But at the same time, this was a professional opportunity that fit for what I wanted, where I wanted my career to go, and also gave me the opportunity, as I said before, to have very far-reaching impacts on health across the zone and across the province. And that story is quite typical. I think as physicians choose to come and go, we have to move beyond looking at them as community commodities, but as professionals who come and go and choose to stay, choose to leave for multiple different reasons, and accept it and focus on what we can do to try to convince more to come and less to go. So you're probably wondering, hopefully, if we're doing our job, what you can all do to help us with this process. If we go to the next slide. So Nicole and I thought in terms of the ask to this audience, in terms of the larger audience out there, really breaking it down to three kind of bins: communities, organizations, individuals. So what can communities do to help? Nicole set the stage very well that people don't come to a medical practice, people come to a community. And it has to be a community that has things that they want to be there. Communities, to have an impact on physician recruitment, communities need to focus on things like building safe communities, about thinking about crime in their community and thinking what they can do to help with that. Having solid and demonstrable action on diversity and anti-racism policy, physical infrastructure to support healthy living and recreational opportunities, and building a sense of community in terms of what physical infrastructure is important for people to feel like they're coming to a community. Vibrant downtowns, shopping, restaurants, common spaces. If we want to stabilize our physician community, we need to stabilize our communities.
So an example of that is actually one that's pictured right here. A little bit biased as the communication fundraising manager for the Wellness Center, but I'm very proud to be part of that project because 10 years later, it's actually coming up in my work now. We sometimes have healthcare providers coming from larger urban centers, and when they're considering rural communities, they're still looking for some urban offerings. So places like the Wellness Center are really important. They appreciate our small shops and clothing stores, so they don't have to go into the city to shop. They like our food offering. Like, we have quite a variety when you actually sit down and look at what we have for food offerings, or even the coffee shops. Our network of libraries is important. It's important resources for people. So I think it's a lot of times it's these really wonderful things that, not that we take for granted, it's just you often hear a lot that we don't have a lot here. And as through this role, I've sat down and I'd take you to task on that one. Or when people say they're bored, I'm like, come to me, I'll come help you. So the Wellness Center and some other the big amenities that Aaron mentioned is a really important piece of that.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful example of how we invest in a community to make it more attractive for not just physicians, but for professionals and for families. Going to the next catch bin there. Actually, go back one slide if you could. Yeah, sorry, just going to the next bin, organizational. So what can organizations do? Organizations within our community have a huge role in supporting recruitment activities. Organizations can take part in building pride around our healthcare delivery and healthcare infrastructure. Organizations can invest in community to ensure the previous mentioned community level supports are in place. For example, investments in healthy Pictou County, investments in large infrastructure facilities such as the Wellness Center, or distributed physical activity trail system, etc. Some of the communities, organizations that are well positioned to be real strong advocates for this type of work are Healthy Pictou County, of course, our health foundations, community actions through the Chamber of Commerce, the REN, etc. Also, in terms of their role as employers and also as ambassadors, having strong anti-racist and diversity frameworks and focusing on the art of the possible for healthcare families as they come to our communities.
So Aaron had mentioned some of our partners. So our organization is actually funded through our 6 municipal units, both of our health foundations, so the Sutherland Harris Memorial Hospital Foundation, the Aberdeen Health Foundation, local businesses and individuals, and then all of our physicians as well. I work day to day with people and organizations in this community. The other day I mentioned that we had a virtual site visit. I had some amazing videos from Dean's, which is our tourism leg here. I can't create those videos in the dead of winter and show them how nice it is to go for a dip in the Northumberland Strait. So having those is important. Another important example of that was the welcome guide. So we have a link to it on one of our last slides, but that was a big project that we did that was funded through the province and through some of our community partners like the Chamber, Dean's, and the REN for us to work together to really have that community-wide piece to help sell that our community. And we've also worked with people like Big Brothers Big Sisters, Kids First, and other nonprofits who play a vital role in helping make this a vibrant community.
So we get down to the final, which is individuals, and what can individuals do to help this process? And again, individuals have a huge role. As I mentioned before, individuals can work towards an understanding that physician recruitment is a process and not a one and done. Also, challenging individuals to seek out stories of positivity in our health system. Take the time to get to know what we do at our hospital. Take the time to get to know what we do at our clinics. Take the time to hear the success stories of recruitment in our community, and then commit to passing them on. We would ask individuals to be strong advocates for community infrastructure projects, for vibrant downtowns, for shopping and eating opportunities, and be very strong advocates for safety in our communities. We'd also ask individuals on an ongoing basis to respect boundaries for healthcare providers, and also for those that understand that these individuals are making decisions about life and work in the context of their families, and not dehumanize community commodities.
I can't have this platform and not make a plug for housing is one of our biggest issues, and that's not specific to physicians or any one area, but that's one of the biggest ones is looking for short-term rentals. As you can imagine, if people are moving within the province, across the country, even across the ocean, purchasing a home isn't usually the first thing we're looking for short-term rentals, so that's a big piece of that. We also, I mentioned earlier, the boat ride with the students is typically donated every year because the person would like to contribute, which is so kind. And I have a million good stories about what people have done in this community. Either I mentioned supporting the family that was quarantining. We had a site visit once and come to find out that the little girl that was with them needed gluten-free. Shelly at the dock whipped up chicken nuggets from scratch for this 7-year-old who was gluten-free, who couldn't eat anything on the menu. So it's those little touches that make a really big difference for people. And something that's kind of cool, if we can head to the next slide, I'd love to talk about what you're already doing. So many of you, if not every single one of you here tonight or online, are actually already a huge part of this without realizing it. My job is to sell the community. That's it. That's what I do. I'm not trying to convince people. I'm just selling what's here and trying to show them and showcase what interests them. I can't sell what we don't have, and I can't say something that we're not. So I actually think Pictou County does a really good job of making my job easier. Anytime we've done site visits, usually the first stop is at the hospital. When we're walking around the hospital, people have no idea that it's a prospective physician or their family, and almost every single time we've had that, everyone says, is everyone always this nice? And I say, sometimes people aren't in the community because we don't want to gloss it too much, but people really are friendly here, and that's something that means a lot to people. I love driving through downtowns and showing stores like Forge Home and Garden or Angela's or a Head of Hair over in Pictou to show people that they don't have to go into the city for gifts or things for their home. I also love talking about the work that Autism Pictou County and Summer Street does. So those are such special and wonderful things in our community that are, for some things, very unique to our community that we help sell. Also, my experience in welcoming physicians from the UK, a lot of them are used to private schools. So when they come here, they ask where our private schools are, which we do share with them about what we do have. But what I love is actually taking them to New Glasgow Academy to meet Principal Francis, or heading out to Northumberland to talk about the IB program for them to meet Principal O'Toole. And one of the coolest things I think that happens on that is, well, one uncool thing, I feel really old when I walk around the high school. I feel okay until I walk into the high school, and then I remember my age. But then when we're walking around, they're calling students by first name. They're asking how their math test went. You've got hundreds of students, and they're calling them by first name, and they're not putting on a show or doing that. That's what they do on day to day. So it's pretty special for us to be able to share that with the community. So then on the next slide, we kind of wanted to issue a challenge about what you're doing to build a welcoming community. We're going to share a few of them. Some of them seem pretty obvious, but one of them, which Aaron alluded to, is being a community ambassador. So positivity breeds positivity. So many of the problems that we have here are ones that you'll see in other communities across the province, even in neighboring provinces or across the country. Is with this role, we chose to take action and work for the greater good of the community and shine some light on the really good things that are happening here, because they are.
So I think another important part of this would be supporting our students as they go through the medical education. And do you know somebody in med school? And if you do, let us know. We connect with them through their medical career, checking in to let them know their hometown is proud of them, letting them know about opportunities for placement during school. In fact, we have a group of medical students coming to our community next month? May. 5 of them in their first year medical students who get sent out to community to experience what it's like to practice medicine in a small community. 2 out of the 5 happen to be locals, which is a neat story. So connect with the students, and also if you encounter students, medical students, as a patient or in the community, if you're comfortable, make them feel welcome, highlight things, thank them. Students remember their experiences when they're here, and they carry that with them through their educational career.
Another thing you can do is make the effort. For some people, it's the little things. Shelley at the dock could have said, you know what, we don't have chicken nuggets, but she whipped up her own chicken nuggets that day, and that meant a lot, not only to the family, but to me as well. So that's something that you remember. You remember your chicken nugget stories, basically, is what they are. But something else too, and someone highlighted it recently, was, we welcome physicians from diverse backgrounds. Some come from Yarmouth, some are coming from New Brunswick, BC, overseas in different communities, and with them aren't names like McDonald or Smith, which was intended to be a dig at Aaron, but Aaron's wife and father are here too, so it's inadvertently, I apologize, a dig at the rest of the family. But they're common names and they're easy to say. But a small but large gesture is making an effort to properly pronounce people's names. It's okay to ask them if it's a complicated name or one that you're not used to because of what we're used to. Ask them what it is. It's something that can instantly create that welcoming atmosphere to make an effort to properly call them by their proper name.
Final thing we'd like to ask you to do is be welcoming. And yes, it's that simple, and yes, we do have to say it. We receive feedback on an ongoing basis that people are friendly, but not always welcoming. We say hello, we reach out, but we're not inviting them to our tables or social events or checking in on people to see how they're doing. It's the seemingly small and simple gestures that make people feel like they're part of the community. So when you see someone new at swimming lessons, are you simply saying hi, or are you checking to see if they want to head to a class with you or meet up for a walk? Or if they need anything else or any other help settling into our community.
So on the next slide, I alluded to it earlier. Someone said this to me early on, and I keep it in mind quite a bit. And if it's something I could leave you with, as you hear some of our ongoing challenges, please know that there are people working on it. As Aaron mentioned, we've done a lot of good work. We have a lot more work to do. And if there was an overnight solution, we'd be doing it. So there isn't that overnight solution. Where we have quick wins and things, we are doing that, which is great. And when we have some successes, there's a lot of things that are actually long-term investments, so we may not see the results on that for years to come.
Yeah, I would mirror that, and I think I would add to that too, that we understand that access to healthcare providers, especially primary healthcare providers, is problematic right now. It is a challenge. We've had actually some recent developments that have made it even more of a challenge in this community. Nicole and I, as well as the committee for Healthy Pictou County, the recruiters, frontline physicians, and the leadership team for Nova Scotia Health in this zone all understand how critically important it is, and we're all passionate about trying to provide the best healthcare opportunities we can for people. We're not, the physicians and the healthcare administrators, we're also residents of this community. We understand the critical need, and we understand how important it is. So hopefully with ongoing investments and attention to some of these things we've discussed tonight, and through the good work of Healthy Pictou County as well as our Nova Scotia Health recruiters, you'll be hearing more and more positive stories that you can hopefully share around and try to challenge some of the narratives that you will hear otherwise. So thank you very much.
Yeah. If we can head to the last slide. Just before we head into questions, we could have spoken about this stuff probably for hours, days, weeks. We didn't want to do that to you. It was very high level for a lot of pieces, and I think an oversimplification of some pretty complex issues and complex networks and structures. But we hope it just helps with a little bit of context, a little bit of further understanding, or gives you a few things to hang on to. If anything, and I feel it every day, even the days when we're discouraged, very proud of this community. This is very unique in what our approach is and what we're trying to do. And hopefully we see the payoff for the long-term investments that we're making. Had to make a plug for the welcome guide, so it's available on our website. They were distributed throughout the community in print copy, largely through our municipal units and other community organizations. The libraries also received a large bulk of them, and each of the libraries have them on reference as well, so there's always a copy available. The best thing is that it's available online, and you can actually read through it as a flip book. I sent it off to another continent the day that I got it in my hands online, and we've used it quite a bit. So we encourage you to use it. If you know someone that's even outside of healthcare, it's really intended for the whole community, for businesses, organizations, and people to use. So I think now we're switching to questions. So sure. We'll await your questions in the process as such.
Great. We have 2 questions. The first one comes from Jim McKenna. He asked 2 questions, but you answered one already, so I'm just going to ask the second one. The question is, have we spoken to physicians who have come and stayed for many years and asked them what led them to stay?
Want to take that, Nicole? Or,
me? Yeah.
Or I can.
You start, and I'll wrap up.
Actually, Nicole, you could answer this one, and the next one will be for Aaron.
Oh.
Sure. Sounds good to me.
Okay. Yes, we have. I think one important piece about our recruitment and the retention side of things is the involvement of physicians. This isn't us saying, here's what we like about the community. It's us asking them what they need, what their opinion is, and things like that. So, and I would like to address, I think the Health Authority also does try to do exit interviews where possible, as you can imagine, not always easy, but that's also where you get feedback as well. And if people are leaving for personal reasons, they can still highlight what the positives are. But we work closely with our physicians who are here on organizing our recruitment events or involving them in site visits, so they're a huge part of all of this. Thank you, Jim.
Question is from Joan Slovaka, who I think is watching from the United States. Just one second. This is kind of a technical question. Can they shift some of the primary care patients needed to internal medicine physicians to buffer the lack of primary care medical doctors? In the US, you have an option of selecting an internal medicine medical doctor or a primary care physician. There are many patients that could really benefit from shifting their care over. So that may be more complicated than you can answer, Aaron, but that's the question.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's layers of complexity to that system, and it really speaks to how the Canadian system is set up, which, I could talk to that and geek out on that for the next hour if need be. I think suffice to say that the Canadian system is really set up with a strong commitment that the entry point in is through primary care. I'm choosing my words carefully there. It's not, the way it's set up now, admittedly, is through a primary care physician, but the entry point really should be through primary care. First of all, we don't have the number of internal medicine specialists here to support doing that. And second, when we look at systems whereby specialists are providing frontline care, we know that the system cost, in terms of all of our tax dollars funding that system, the system cost goes way up. And in fact, health outcomes aren't improved, and in some cases are worse. If you look at systems such as the United States and look at it as a system, how it's set up, we know that it's a much more expensive system, and we know that the outcomes are actually not better, and in many cases the outcomes are worse across a population basis. So it's a great idea, and it'd be great if we had lots of internal medicine doctors to do that, but unfortunately our internal medicine doctors are more rare birds than our primary care physicians.
Okay, so I'm correcting myself. She is actually living in Nova Scotia and watching us on Zoom. And her second question, the second question from Joan is what is New Glasgow doing to support your efforts bringing in new businesses, Dalhousie University creating a satellite center, innovative think tanks that could be enticing to the physician partners? So maybe Nicole has answered that question. I'm not sure. But,
well, I can follow up on that. So is it specific to the town of New Glasgow or just the community? I can give you a really cool story, actually. So the OBGYN anesthetist husband-wife duo that came last December. It was cold and rainy and horrible, and they came from South Africa where it was like hot and sunny and beautiful. So it was really hard to sell the community. I was like, and they liked it. They loved it when they came here. And I said, if you can take us at this, like, you deserve a beautiful summer here. So we actually met for coffee at the time with Mayor Nancy Dix. So at different times and when appropriate, we may involve municipal people or people who represent businesses. The chamber's been involved in site visits too. When we sat down with that couple, she shared that she actually spoke Zulu. And if anyone knows Stacy from Roots for Youth, her husband speaks Zulu. So Nancy Dix, just took her phone out and was like, I have someone here who speaks Zulu and I need you to talk to them, and put the physician on the phone, and they had a full conversation, set up dinner for them to have dinner that night, and connected them from someone from their community. So largely our municipal units and communities are very much involved, either the business community or municipalities, but really directly involved and have been part of really special and unique instances and stories.
Okay, I think this will be the last question, and it's for you, Aaron. Can more nurse practitioners be hired at emergency to offset the long waits as people without doctors must go there?
So again, complex question. But I think I'm going to kind of reframe the question and I'll come back to it a bit. I think that we have to rethink a bit our primary care. And instead of thinking about needing more primary care or GPs, what people need is they need access to a healthcare team. And that healthcare team usually can consist of physicians, but it can also consist of other professions like family practice nurses, nurse practitioners, pharmacists, etc. Nurse practitioners are playing a very important role across the province, especially in primary care, especially on our rural sites. We do need to support our emergency departments with any resources we can, but unless we go more upstream than that and start really supporting our primary care teams, we will never stem the flood at our emergency doors. So I would challenge back on that I think, you know, having said that, I know there is long wait lists and wait times at our emergency departments, but to really address that adequately, I think we need to be putting as many resources as we can into primary care to start to stem some of that flow into our emergency departments. And nurse practitioners, yeah, absolutely can play a vital role in that, and they do. I just did, as part of my role, I did a site visit to one of our hospitals in Parsboro. And similar to many other rural towns and areas across the province, very difficult to have adequate physician services in that community to address the population's needs. But there are 3 nurse practitioners working very, very diligently and well within that community as part of the team, addressing people's primary care needs. So that's I think we're going to see more and more of these types of teams coming up across the province, especially in rural areas.
You know, I'm aware that we're past the hour. There's 2 more excellent questions.
That's
but
fine. Yeah.
I'm fine. That was our fault, I think.
What are we doing technology-wise? Should I ask these questions? We're okay? All right, so. This question is from Caitlin Tuesnard. What can patients without primary providers do to access care while waiting for their name to be taken off the 811 need a primary provider in quotation marks list?
Yeah, thanks, and hi, Caitlin, if you're out there. Thanks for bringing that up. That's great. So people who don't have a primary care provider or primary care team can access care through dialing 811, through telemedicine and virtual care. We have the Well Women's Clinic. You don't need a primary care provider to access that. We have walk-in clinic is reopened again in the Aberdeen Centre. And then we also have unattached patient clinics throughout the zone and one here. That clinic is designed, the way I say it is, that's designed to be your foster home in terms of primary care until you have a physician off the list. As you can imagine, the unattached clinic locally is very pressured in terms of patient access because we have so many patients here who are actively looking for a physician. But we continue to work to try to support that clinic to the best of our ability. You can get the contact information for that unattached patient clinic through 811.
And so there are several questions, but the last one I'm going to ask you is about nurse practitioners and their role in the healthcare. So if you could just comment generally on that, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. I think they play an integral and very important role in healthcare and an increasing role in healthcare. I can speak a little bit from personal experience. When I was in my primary care practice in Westville, I worked alongside 2 absolutely fantastic nurse practitioners who were providing very high quality primary care and on an ongoing basis, much the same as a family physician would. The roles are somewhat different in terms of how, you know, the route to get there. So a nurse practitioner typically will be an RN who will practice for a period of time in that role, then go back and go through a training program to get their NP designation. But I think it's a very important team member that we're going to be seeing more and more of, and they provide very, very high quality and integrated care.
Okay, I think that wraps it up for this evening. My name is Debbie Van Volpen, and I am honored to be one of the members representing Trinity United Church's TUC Talks team. We would like to thank Nicole and Aaron for their informative words this evening about why healthcare professionals would choose little old Pictou County. Well, I think we have to start calling you. I think I was reminded to take my mask off too. Maybe that's better. I think we have to start calling you to the Mythbusters of Pictou County. Because first, we have learned so much about myths that we have all heard and believed. And yes, we do have to remember that healthcare professionals are humans, and they have every right to choose what fits best for them and their families and their lives. Second, we have learned that the province is working together to attract, retain, and support students as residents, which will help to stabilize healthcare in our community and in our province. So our communities, our organizations, our neighborhoods, our people are all so important to drawing new recruits to our areas. Third, unless we have conversations like this, like TUC Talks tonight, many don't ever get to learn the details about the work and the numerous initiatives that really are happening here. It's sort of amusing, but I'm reminded of what makes a marriage work this evening. Most times we don't jump into a long-lasting relationship without a huge amount of compatibility research, life similarity checks, monitoring of our likes and our dislikes, and so on and so on. So this process is no different. The bottom line is not to recruit health professionals for an eventual divorce, but for a long-lasting marriage that will benefit all partners. And we can all play a part in making our community as welcoming and as open as possible. So thank you both for teaching us that we have to be patient for this courtship to be successful. So just as a small token of our appreciation, we're going to be presenting Aaron and Nicole with an apron that Wear Well Garments has made for us locally. It says, TUC Talks, Food for Thought. So I think that says it all. Thank you all, everyone, Aaron and Nicole, for joining us this evening. Thank you and good night.